Put your headphones on. Now.
Welcome to Dreadloop, where the silence feels heavier.
There were two voices in the audio of the last video my sister ever recorded. Only one of them was hers. I did not notice the second voice for a long time. I did not notice it the first time I watched, or the 7th, or the 13th. I noticed it on viewing 22, at 3 in the morning, with the apartment lights off and the headphones plugged in, and my forehead resting against the screen because I had been crying and I had forgotten how not to. The video is 11 minutes and 4 seconds long. The file is 1.41 gigabytes. The hash, which I have checked 38 times now, has never changed. Whatever is on the video has always been on the video. I have only learned to hear it. You don't watch your sister's last video 40 times to remember her. You watch it 40 times because watching is the only thing she still has. I am going to tell you about the 40 viewings. I am going to tell you what I saw on the 35th that I cannot stop thinking about. And I am going to tell you about the 41st, which is the one I did not watch. My sister's name was Iris. The state of Michigan still lists her as a missing person. Case 2024 MPO 4417. Namus MP 92814. She has been missing for 9 weeks. The police have been kind. They have also been clear. The footage from her last upload is the only piece of evidence anyone has, and the footage does not show what happened to her, because the camera was switched off 6 minutes before whatever happened. She made her living exploring abandoned places. She had a YouTube channel called Quiet Rooms with 380,000 subscribers. She drove a white Toyota Tacoma that her editor Vivian helped her pick out. She lived in a 1-bedroom in southwest Detroit. She was 28. She was the better of us. I am her older brother. My name is Theo. I teach U.S. history at a public high school in Buffalo, New York, and I am 31. And I do not normally tell anybody anything about myself, because the parts that matter are mostly small and the rest is just being tired. Reason I am telling you is that I am about to ask you not to do something that I did. I am going to ask you not to watch a video 40 times. If you have a person you cannot stop watching, I am going to ask you to look at me and to consider what happened to me and to consider what I saved myself from by not watching the 41st time. This is not a creepy story. Or it is, but it is also a love letter to my sister who is gone, and a thank you to my mother, who has been through this before, and who knew, the way mothers know, what kind of door I had walked into and what kind of door it was becoming. Video is called *Highmark Aquatic Center, 1976-1996, Ohio Valley Time Capsule *. Iris uploaded it on June 11th at 7:14 in the evening. She drove home from Wheeling that afternoon, edited the cut on her laptop, sent the upload, ate leftover pad thai from her fridge, according to a delivery note Vivian found, and went to bed. The next morning she texted Vivian about color grading the next project. That afternoon she left her apartment to scout an abandoned car dealership in Toledo. She did not arrive at the car dealership. Her phone last pinned a tower outside Bowling Green, Ohio at 4:36 p.m. The Tacoma was found 6 days later, parked legally in a Walmart lot in Findlay, locked, the keys still in the ignition. No signs of struggle, no blood, no Iris. The case has been open for 9 weeks. There are no leads. I have read the police report. I have read it 12 times. The report does not mention the video. The video was uploaded 23 hours before she went missing. The detective in charge said it was unrelated. He told my mother, kindly, that abandoned places creators usually go missing in 2 ways: a structural collapse or a stranger who followed them home. The Tacoma in Findlay suggested the second. He said this with the soft voice people use when they are trying to give you the truth in a way that won't hurt. I want to describe my first viewing. I watched it on the morning my mother called me to tell me Iris was missing. This was day 3. I had not slept. I was in my apartment in Buffalo. I was sitting on the floor with my back against the couch because my couch is too soft to sit on when you are trying to be alert. I opened the video on my phone with the sound off because the sound felt like too much. The video opens with Iris in front of a chain-link fence. She is wearing a maroon hoodie. I bought her for Christmas in 2019. Her hair is pulled back. She is grinning the small, half-embarrassed grin she always grinned when she was about to start filming. She raises her hand and waves at the camera and says, asterisk, "Hi friends. Welcome to Wheeling, West Virginia." Asterisk, she walks the camera around the perimeter of a long brick building. The building is the Highmark Aquatic Center, which closed in 1996 because the structural engineering report on the natatorium roof said it would cost more to repair than to demolish. Wheeling never demolished it. The building has been sitting on the Ohio River bluff for 28 years. Iris finds the gap in the fence she scouted on Google Earth. She squeezes through. The camera follows. She narrates the way she always narrated. Calm, conversational, mildly nerdy. The way someone talks when they assume you already love what they love. She walks into the lobby. The lobby still has its original 1976 carpet, in a brown and orange wave pattern. The fluorescent fixtures hang at angles. There is a vending machine that she lingers on. The vending machine still has product inside, old bags of Doritos with a logo Doritos hasn't used since 2002. She laughs at this. She says, asterisk, somebody's grandniece is going to find this and think we ate weird snacks. Asterisk, that was the line that got me through the first viewing. I laughed when she laughed. I laughed for the first time in 3 days. Then I closed the video and called my mother and we talked for an hour about nothing. That was viewing 1. I watched it again that night. Viewing 2, I watched it the next morning. Viewing 3. By the end of the first week of her being missing, I had watched it 12 times. I want to be clear about something. The first 12 viewings, I did not see anything wrong. I watched it the way anybody watches their missing sister's last upload. I watched it to be near her. I watched it to look at her face. I watched it because my apartment was quiet and her voice was not. On viewing 5, I did notice one small thing. At minute 4:15, Iris is walking along the edge of the kiddie pool, which is dry, and she stops and she says, asterisk, oh, that's nice. Then she keeps walking. She does not say what is nice. The camera does not pan to anything. She just walks. I noticed it because I had heard her say, oh, that's nice, in 50 other videos. She always said it when she found something specific. A 1980s ceiling tile with a water stain shaped like a dog. A receipt for a hospital cafeteria from 1971. A child's drawing left in a desk drawer. Oh, that's nice, meant I want you to look at this with me. It meant the camera was about to pan. The camera did not pan. On viewing 5, I made a note in my phone. Asterisk 4:15. What was nice? I told myself she was tired. I told myself her cut was sloppy. I told myself she had decided in the edit to take the pan out and forgot to re-record over the line. I told myself this was not a thing. I closed the video. That was as much wrongness as the first 12 viewings showed me. One small line, one missing pan, no follow-through. That is what I am asking you to keep in mind. The video did not change. I changed by viewing 13. I was watching it once a day. I had stopped going into school. I had emailed the principal a vague note about a family emergency, and the principal, whose name is Anna, had emailed back a kind note that did not ask follow-up questions. My substitute was a retired teacher named Mr. Pillai, who Anna said could cover me as long as I needed. I did not know how long I was going to need. On viewing 13, I noticed the second thing. At minute 7:14, Iris is standing at the edge of the deep end of the main natatorium. The natatorium roof has partially collapsed. There is a hole in the south corner that lets daylight in. The light hits the standing water in the bottom of the deep end at an angle that produces a kind of dim shimmer. Iris is 12 feet above. The water, standing on the cracked tile of the deck. She is narrating. "This is the part of these buildings I love," she says. Asterisk. You can see the ghost of the architect's intention. They wanted you to walk in and feel this. The high ceiling. The echo. The smell of chlorine that's been gone for 30 years. Look how the light hits. Asterisk. The camera tilts down to the water. For 1.5 seconds, the camera is pointed at the standing water in the bottom of the deep end. The water is still. Reflective. There is nothing in it. She tilts the camera back up. That is what I saw on viewing 12. Nothing on viewing 13 in the still water. For 1 frame. And only when I had the video paused and I was scrubbing back and forth. There was a shape. I want to be careful. The shape was not a face. The shape was not a person. The shape was, and this is the only honest way I can describe it, the kind of shape your brain insists on making out of static when you stare at static long enough. It had the suggestion of a vertical orientation. It had the suggestion of 2 darker spots near the top. I scrub it back. I scrub it forward. I freeze framed. I CREEN. SOTTED. I sent the screenshot to Vivian. Vivian had been Iris's editor for 3 years. Vivian had cut every video Iris had ever uploaded. Vivian had seen the Highmark footage 4 times during the edit. Vivian called me back within 10 minutes. She said, asterisk. Theo, I see the screenshot. There's nothing in the screenshot. I said, look at the center. She said, I am looking at the center. I said, there's a shape. She said very gently, Theo, there is no shape. It's water and reflected ceiling. I cut this scene. I color graded this scene. There is nothing in it. Asterisk, I want you to understand that Vivian was telling me the truth. I understand now that she was telling me the truth. I told her thank you. I told her I had not slept. I told her I would call her tomorrow. I did not call her tomorrow. I want to tell you about viewings 14 through 21, because those are the viewings my mother has asked me about, and I have not given her a real answer on viewing 14. I noticed Iris's left hand. She was holding the camera in her right. Her left hand was visible at minute 2:12 when she pushed open a metal door labeled Women's. Her left hand was steady. Her ring finger had the small silver band our grandmother had left her in a will. The band was tilted slightly, the way a ring sits on a finger that has lost a little weight. I had not seen Iris in 11 weeks before she made the video. We had been planning a Thanksgiving. We had not been planning anything else. The 11 weeks of not seeing her are now the longest I had ever gone without seeing her in our lives. I want you to understand that this is not a horror detail. This is a grief detail. The two are not always the same. On viewing 15, I rewound the lobby section and I noticed the carpet, the brown and orange wave pattern. The thing I noticed was not in the carpet. The thing I noticed was that there was a long, faint streak across the carpet that ran from the front door to the staircase that led down to the natatorium. The streak was the width of a heel. It was the color of dust that had been disturbed. Iris had not walked along that line. She had walked the perimeter of the lobby. She had filmed the vending machine. She had filmed the front desk. She had then turned and walked toward the staircase. Her path is recorded by where the camera went. The streak in the carpet did not match her path. It went from the front door to the staircase in a straight line, like somebody had walked through the lobby ahead of her and not stopped to look at anything. I told myself the streak was old. I told myself it was a maintenance worker from the demolition assessment 2 years prior. I told myself any number of things. On viewing 17, I noticed something I do not know how to describe. There is a moment at minute 5:52 when Iris is walking past the men's locker room. She does not enter it. She narrates briefly, asterisk, I'm not going in there. The floor in there is gone. I checked yesterday, asterisk, and she moves on. As she walks past the doorway is dark. The interior is unlit. On viewing 17, for a fraction of a second, when the doorway is at the right edge of the frame, the dark of the doorway is lighter than the dark of the wall around. That is all I can say. The doorway was a slightly less black, as if there were a small amount of light in the locker room, as if a flashlight, somewhere very far back, had been turned on for a frame. I went back to viewing 18 and counted frames. The brighter dark lasts for 2 frames. At 24 frames per second, that is 83 milliseconds. Below the threshold of conscious viewing, I started reading articles about subliminal frame insertion. I stopped after I found 3. I do not believe my sister's video had subliminal frames inserted. I believe that an 83 millisecond bright frame inside a dark doorway in an abandoned locker room is something my brain made up to keep watching, because the watching had become the only thing I was doing, and my brain was scared of running out of things to find. On viewing 19, I tried not to look at the doorway. I looked at Iris's face. Her face did the same thing it had done the previous 18 viewings. She was tired. She was happy. She was doing her job. She was 28 years old, and she was making a video about a building she found beautiful. And she had no idea that she had 11 days left, and I had no idea that I was about to spend 9 weeks watching the last 11 days of her life from the wrong side of a screen. On viewing 20, I made myself a sandwich. This is a small thing, but it matters. I had not made myself a sandwich in 3 weeks. I made it during the deep end shot. I want you to understand that the deep end shot, by viewing 20, was the part one always paused on. I would freeze the frame, I would look, I would try to see. And on viewing 20, I made myself a sandwich while it was paused. And I came back to the desk, and I ate the sandwich. And I looked at the frame, and I felt, for the first time, that the frame. And I had a relationship. That is the part that scares me, in retrospect. Not the shape, not the second voice. The relationship. On viewing 21, I looked away from the screen for 30 seconds during the deep end pan. I just looked at my window. I did not want to be the one looking at the water. I wanted to give the water a moment of not being looked at, in case the looking was the thing that was wrong. When I looked back at the screen, the water was the water. The pan was over. The viewing continued. On viewing 22, I noticed the third thing, which was the first one that I could not explain to myself. I was wearing headphones. I was at 3 in the morning. I was at the moment in the kiddie pool walk when Iris says asterisk, oh that's nice. Asterisk, behind her voice. Under it, quieter than her voice by maybe 20 decibels. Somebody else said something at the same time, not over her. Under her. Like a second mouth in the same room, speaking in the same beat. I could not make out the word. I could only hear that there was a second voice. I rewound. I listened again. I increased the gain on my audio software. The second voice was a male voice. It was older than her. It said something in 2 syllables. The 2 syllables sounded. And I want to be exact about this, because exactness is what I have left. Like asterisk, come look. Asterisk, I did not call Vivian. I did not call my mother. I sat in my apartment and I listened to those 2 seconds, 81 times. Then I closed the video. That was viewing 20-2 dot by viewing 28. I had started to notice things outside the video. I want to be careful about how I describe this part, because I have already had to describe it once to a doctor my mother asked me to see. And the doctor was kind, and the doctor used a word I did not love. The word was projection. The doctor said grief sometimes makes the boundary between what is on a screen and what is in a room thinner than the boundary needs to be. The doctor said I was not unwell. The doctor said I was metabolizing. I believed the doctor. I want you to know that the doctor's name was Dr. Hennessy. She had a small office on Delaware Avenue with a window that looked out at a parking lot and a single tree. She was in her 60s. She wore a cardigan with elbow patches. She had a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Aunt," and the coffee mug made me trust her in a way I have not trusted a medical professional in years. She let me talk for 40 minutes without interrupting. I told her about the deep end shot. I told her about the streak in the lobby carpet. I told her about the second voice. I told her about the squares of light. I told her about the wet footprint and the natatorium reverb and the ring on Iris's finger that had grown loose. When I was done, she asked me what I had eaten that day. I told her honestly. Half a banana. She asked me when I had last slept more than 4 hours. I told her I did not know. She did not say I was hallucinating. She did not say the things I had seen were imaginary. She said, very precisely, that grief, in its acute phase, reorganizes the visual cortex's threshold for pattern recognition. She said the brain, when it is missing somebody, will spend a great deal of energy looking for them in the wrong places. She said that this is not a malfunction. This is the brain doing love at full volume, in the only direction the love can still go. She said I was metabolizing. She gave me a sleeping pill prescription, which I filled and never took. She gave me her direct number, which I have not called. She told me to come back in 2 weeks, which I did not do, because by the time 2 weeks had passed, the file was deleted and I was sleeping again, and the appointment did not feel necessary. I want to be honest with you. I do not know if Dr. Hennessy was right. I do not know if my brain was making it up. I do not know if there was something in the deep end of the high mark and my brain was the receiver, or if there was nothing in the deep end of the high mark and my brain was the broadcaster. I have learned, in the 9 weeks of this, that the difference between those two things is smaller than I used to think it was. I'm also going to tell you what I saw on the morning after viewing 28. I walked into my bathroom at 6 a.m. and there was a wet footprint on the tile, in the shape of a bare foot, slightly larger than mine. I had slept alone. The window was closed. The footprint was dry by 6:15. By 6:30, I had convinced myself I had stepped onto a damp bath mat the night before and forgotten. I had not been using the bath mat in 9 weeks. On viewing 30, I started to hear the natatorium reverb in my apartment. Not loudly, quietly, the way a song you've been playing all day plays in your head after you turn it off. My HVAC vents, and this happens in any apartment, I know this happens in any apartment, would let out a small whistle when the heat kicked on, and the whistle had a tail of about a second, the way an empty natatorium has a tail of about a second. I heard the vent. I heard the tail. I sat on my couch and timed it. The tail of my vent was 0.2 of a second longer than the tail of my apartment's previous winter. I want to be honest. I have no recording of last winter's vent. I am going off memory. On viewing 33, I called Vivian for the third time that she said asterisk. Theo, when did you eat last? I said, this morning, she said. Theo, when did you eat last? Asterisk, I told her the truth. I told her I had eaten half a Pop-Tart on Tuesday. It was now Thursday. She said she was driving up from Detroit. She said she would be at my apartment by 10 p.m. She said please do not watch it again before she gets there. I watched it again. That was viewing 30-5. This is the part I want to tell you about. On viewing 35, I went back to the deep end shot, the 1.5 second pan to the standing water. I had screenshotted it 11 times by this point. I had the screenshot on my desk in 3 different sizes. I had stared at the shape until my eyes lost the ability to see it as a shape and started to see it as a habit. On viewing 35, I did not look at the shape. I looked at what was reflected on the surface of the water around the shape. The natatorium ceiling, in 1996, had 10 skylights. 6 of them had been smashed by 2024. 4 were intact. The 4 intact ones produced 4 bright squares on the surface of the water. I had seen them every viewing. I had counted them on viewing 8. On viewing 35, there were 5. I counted them again. 5 squares of reflected light on the surface of the water dot. I went to Google Earth. I pulled up the satellite of the Highmark roof. I counted the holes. There were 6 holes, 4 intact panels. I went back to the video. I freeze-framed it second. 7 minutes, 14 seconds, and 5 milliseconds. I counted the squares. 5. I rewound to second 7:13. I counted the squares on a different part of the surface. In the shallower water, near where Iris was standing. I counted 4 dots in the same shot, at the same moment. 4 squares in the shallow end, and 5 squares in the deep end. The 5th square, in the deep end, was approximately 2 feet south of where the shape had been on viewing 13. I closed the video. I went to the bathroom. I sat on the floor of the bathroom. I cried for 37 minutes. I want you to understand that I was not crying because of the squares. I was crying because of the slow, awful realization that the video had been showing me something for 35 viewings, and I had only just been ready to see it. And being ready to see it meant something about me had changed. And I did not know if I could change it back. You don't watch your sister's last video 40 times to remember her. You watch it 40 times because watching is the only thing she still has. And the watching after a while is the only thing you still have to. Vivian arrived at 10:15 that night. She made me eat a bowl of soup. She slept on my couch. She woke up at 3 a.m. and found me on the kitchen floor with my laptop, watching the deep end shot in slow motion. She did not yell at me. She closed the laptop very gently. She sat down on the floor next to me. She held my hand. She said, Theo, I'm going to tell you something Iris told me once. She said the first rule of her job was that the place wants to keep you. And the second rule was that the place will use whatever it can to keep you. And the third rule was that the worst thing you could do was love it back. I said, Vivian, the place is not loving me back. I'm watching the video. She said, Theo, the video is the place. I sat with that dot, she said. This is the part Iris would never tell anyone on camera, she told me. She told me because we drove 11 hours to a Sears in Oklahoma once, and you can tell anyone anything in the 11th hour of a drive. She said she had stopped going into one specific category of building. She would not go into closed nursing homes. She had been into one in 2022, in Lima, Ohio. She said she had filmed for 40 minutes and gone home and edited the cut and uploaded the video. She said the editing took her 10 days when it should have taken 3. She said by the 3rd day of editing she could not tell which footage was hers and which was the building's. The building wanted to be presented in a particular order. The building had opinions about the cut. She said by the 7th day she had to ask me to take the project off her hard drive and finish it without her. She said when I finished it and she watched my cut, the building was no longer in the cut. I had cut it out without knowing. She said she never went into another closed nursing home. I asked her quietly, did the Highmark have opinions about its cut? Vivian was silent for a long time. She said, Theo, I cut the Highmark in 2 days. It cut itself. I have never had a cut go that fast. She said, I did not realize until you called me about the screenshot. She said, I'm sorry. I told her not to be sorry. I told her none of this was her fault. I told her I needed to lie. Down on the kitchen floor for a minute, she let me. She sat on the kitchen floor with me. She did not say anything. She put her hand on the back of my neck, the way our mother used to do when one of us was sick, and she let me be there. I want to say something here about my mother. My mother called me on viewing 38. She did not know it was viewing 38. She just called. She called the way mothers call. She said, Theo, are you eating? I said, yes. She said, Theo. I said, I had soup last night. She said, Theo, listen to me. She said, asterisk, after your father died, I watched the wedding video for 2.5 years. I watched it every night. I watched it on the anniversary of his death. I watched it on his birthday. I watched it on my birthday. I watched it on Christmas. I watched it at 3 in the morning. I watched it until I knew the order of the songs, and I watched it past the point where I knew the order, and I watched it past the point where I was watching for him, and I watched it past the point where I was watching for me. I watched it because watching it was the only place he still was. And one night, Theo, I want you to listen to me. One night I sat down to watch it, and I could not press play. I sat there for an hour. I could not press play. And I never watched it again. I never deleted it. It is on a hard drive in your aunt's basement. I have not watched it in 18 years. I said, Mom, she said, Theo, I am asking you. Do not watch it tonight. Sit with it tonight. Sit with the wanting to watch it. The wanting is what she still has. The watching is what gets taken. Asterisk, I told her I loved her. I told her I would try. I watched it that night. Viewing 30-8. On viewing 39, I noticed that the second voice, the one that said, come look, was now slightly more forward in the audio than it had been on viewing 22. Not louder, forward, closer to the front of. The Maz on viewing 40, I noticed that the line, oh that's nice, was no longer in Iris's voice. It was. It is. The waveform is identical. The hash is unchanged. But on viewing 40, I heard it as a voice saying to Iris, asterisk, oh that's nice. Asterisk, like someone behind her, looking at something she had just shown them. The intonation was the same. The mouth that said it was different. I closed the video. I sat in my apartment for 40 minutes. I did not move. Then I made a decision. I want to describe viewing 41 carefully. It was a Saturday. October 19th. The afternoon light through my window was the color afternoon light is in late October, which is gold leaning toward gray. My apartment was clean because Vivian had cleaned it. The dishes were done. The bed was made. I had eaten a real meal, chicken and rice, because Vivian had stayed in town a second night and made it. Sat down at the desk where I had watched the previous 40 viewings. I opened my laptop. I navigated to the file. The file was called highmark_final_cut_v3.mp4. The file was 1.41 gigabytes. The hash, when I checked it for the 39th time, was unchanged. I did not press play. I want you to understand what I did instead. I started a stopwatch on my phone. I set it for 11 minutes and 4 seconds. I put the phone face down on the desk. I rested my hands on the keyboard. I looked at the still frame of the video, which was Iris in her maroon hoodie in front of the chain-link fence, smiling. The first minute was easy. The first minute, I just looked at her face. I have a lot of practice looking at her face. The freckle above her left eyebrow. The small scar on her chin from when she fell off our grandmother's porch in 1999. Slight gap between her front teeth that our father had also had. I looked at her face and I let the seconds go. The second minute was harder. The second minute, my hand drifted toward the trackpad. Not consciously. The hand drifted. I noticed the drift. I lifted my hand off the trackpad. I put my hand in my lap. By minute 3, I had started to feel the apartment around me. I could hear the refrigerator. I could hear a car passing on Elmwood. I could hear the faint creak of my upstairs neighbor walking in his kitchen. The sounds were sounds. They were not the natatorium reverb. They were not whistles with extended tails. They were the sounds of an apartment in Buffalo on a Saturday afternoon in October. By minute 4, I had started to cry, very quietly, the way you cry when you're not trying to dock. By minute 4:15. The moment when Iris would have said, oh, that's nice, I held my breath. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for the second voice. I was waiting for the come look. There was no second voice. The apartment was the apartment. My refrigerator hummed. A door closed somewhere on my floor. I let my breath out. By minute 5, I had started to notice my own breath. The breath was slower than it had been at minute 1. The breath was steady. I am someone who has had panic attacks for most of my adult life. I know what my breath does when it is going to fail me. My breath was not going to fail me. By minute 5:30, I noticed the small framed photograph on the bookshelf to my left. The photograph is of Iris and me at our father's funeral. We are sitting on the curb outside the funeral home. We are eating sandwiches. We are 13 and 10. The photograph was taken by our mother, who had stepped outside to make a phone call and had seen us on the curb and had not been able to resist. I had not looked at this photograph in 9 weeks. I had walked past it every day. I had not been able to look at it. The photograph had become a place I could not go. I looked at it now. I let myself look at it for a long time. At 13. In the photograph, I am giving Iris half of my sandwich. She is taking it with both hands. Her face is small and thin, and she is not smiling. But she is also not crying. And the not crying is the thing I have always loved her for. Because she taught me that you could be sad and still want a sandwich. And that wanting a sandwich did not mean you had stopped being sad. I do not know what made me look at the photograph at minute 5:30 of the silent watching. I think it was the photograph that wanted to be looked at. I think, and I am being careful with this word, that the photograph had been waiting. Not the way the deep end had been waiting. A different kind of waiting, a patient kind. The kind a person who loves you does. By minute 6, I had started to be afraid that the laptop screen was going to flicker. I had started to be afraid that the video was going to start playing on its own. I had started to be afraid of the cursor moving without my hand. I want to be honest. None of those things happened. The screen sat, the cursor sat, the video did not start. My fear was a fear about the room I had been building in my head for 9 weeks, not a fear about the room I was sitting in. By minute 7:14, the moment of the deep end pan. I was thinking about my mother. I was thinking about her on the kitchen floor in Pittsburgh, 18 years ago, watching a wedding video she could no longer turn on. I was thinking about her holding the remote, and the remote being heavier than it should have been, and her arm getting tired and her putting it down, and never picking it up again. I thought, she did this for me too. She did this so I would have a mother who could come back. By minute 8:43, the moment in the kiddie pool walk where the, "Oh, that's nice" lived, there was a long, soft silence in my apartment. The refrigerator had stopped its cycle. My neighbor had stopped walking. The street outside was for 1 second empty of cars. I held that second. I held it until I noticed I was holding it. I held it until it was the longest second of my life. I held it until I realized that what I was holding was not the second. What I was holding was a door. The door had been open for 38 days. The door was the watching. The watching was the door. I just had not stopped walking into it. I let go of the door. The second passed. The refrigerator clicked back on. A car went by. By minute 10, I was no longer crying. I was looking at the screen, and the screen was showing the still frame of my sister's smiling face, and I was thinking that her face was the part of the file I was allowed to keep. The watching was not. The watching was the price the file was charging. At minute 11 and 4 seconds, my phone buzzed against the desk. I picked up the phone. I turned off the alarm. I closed the laptop. I had not pressed play. I had not watched. I sat in the dim afternoon for another minute, just to be sure. The apartment was an apartment. My hands were my hands. Then I stood up. I walked into the kitchen. I poured a glass of water. I drank it. I walked back to the desk. I opened the file manager. I navigated to Highmark_final_cut_v3.mp4. I right-clicked. I selected Move to Trash. I emptied the trash. I opened my email. I went to the message Vivian had sent me on the morning. Iris's channel was paused. The message had a download link. The link was Vivian's backup of every video Iris had ever filmed, stored in a Google Drive folder. There were 247 videos. The link did not expire. I deleted the email. I logged out of the email account. I shut the laptop. Want to tell you something I felt at that moment. I want to be honest about this, because it is the part of the story I have not been able to tell anyone, including my mother and including Vivian, who I love and who would understand. I felt, for the first time in 9 weeks, not watched. Sat in my apartment chair. The afternoon was gold and gray. My neighbor was doing dishes. A truck went by. A child somewhere in the building laughed. Nothing in the room was looking at me. I had not realized, until that moment, that something had been looking at me for 9 weeks. I had not realized it because I had been the one looking at the screen. And I had assumed, in the way you assume, that looking is a one-way verb. It is not. The thing in the deep end of the high mark had been looking back at me. It had been looking back the way a window looks back. It had not been hostile. It had not been hungry. It had simply been on the other side of the looking. When I deleted the file, I closed my side of the window. I do not know if the window is still there. I do not know if the thing on the other side noticed. I do not know if I was ever in danger. I have slowly started to suspect that I was not. I have started to suspect that whatever took my sister was not interested in me. The pull I felt, the wet footprint, the second voice, the fifth square of light, these were all true, and these were all mine. And they were all happening because I had been willing to walk through the door, not because the door was reaching. For me, that the door does not reach. The door is patient. The door waits to see if you walk in. That is the mercy. The mercy is that I was allowed to stop walking. The mercy is that the thing on the other side did not pull. It only opened. The unbearable thing, the thing I have not been able to tell my mother, is that I do not know why my sister was not given the same mercy. I do not know what was different. I do not know whether the door pulled her or whether she walked. Further than I was able to walk, I will not know. I have made my peace with not knowing, in the small, fragile way you make peace with a question you cannot afford to keep asking. I called my mother. I told her I had not watched. I told her I had deleted the file. I told her I had felt the room go back to being a room. My mother cried for a long time. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Theo." I said, "For what?" She said, "For not telling you sooner. I knew what was happening. I knew the shape of it. I have known the shape of it since you were 9 years old." I asked her what she meant. She said she would tell me. She said not on the phone. She said she would tell me at Thanksgiving. That conversation has not happened yet. I went back to school 3 days later. I want to tell you about the classroom. It was a Wednesday, third period. U.S. History, sophomores, 28 kids. The unit was the Civil War. The day's lesson was the second day of Gettysburg. I had taught this lesson 9 times in 9 years. I had a slide deck. I had Pickett's charge mapped on a paper handout. I had a small story about a private from Buffalo who had died on Cemetery Ridge that I told every year, because he was 19 and from my city, and he had a sister. A boy in the back named Jamie raised his hand. He asked me a question I had been asked before, but never quite the way he asked it. He said, "Mr. Theo, how come the people who lived through it never seem to talk about what it was actually like?" I told him the truth I had not been able to say to anyone for 9 weeks. I told him that some things take a long time to become words, and that the part of you that lived through the thing is not always the part of you that knows how to talk, and that the people who lived through Gettysburg were carrying something they did not have the vocabulary for, and that this was not their failure, and that some of them found the words later, and some of them found the words in letters they wrote to their sisters. and some of them never found the words at all, and the silence of the ones who did not find the words was its own kind of record. Jamie nodded. He wrote something in his notebook. The class was quiet for a moment in the way classes are quiet when something has happened that nobody has the equipment to name. A girl in the second row, Aisha, raised her hand a few seconds later. She said, asterisk, Mr. Theo, did the sisters keep the letters? Asterisk, I told her, I did not know. I told her some of the letters had survived. I told her some had been lost. I told her that the ones that survived were now in archives, and that the ones that were lost had not stopped existing. Exactly. They had simply moved into the part of history that lives in the silence between the things we still have. She wrote that down. I do not know if it helped her. It helped me to say it out loud. I want to tell you one more thing about that afternoon. When the bell rang, the kids filed out the way kids file out, talking, dropping pencils, pulling sweatshirts back over their heads. A few of them said, see you tomorrow, Mr. Theo. A boy named Devin, who had been failing the class in September and was now passing it in October, stopped at my desk. He did not say anything. He just put a small piece of paper on the desk. Then he left. The piece of paper was a drawing. It was a drawing of two stick figures on a curb, eating sandwiches. I had not told my students about my sister. I had not told them about the photograph. I had not told them about the funeral, or the curb, or the not crying. I had told them 3 weeks earlier that I had been out for a family thing, and that I was glad to be back. I do not know how Devin knew to draw what he drew. I am not going to pretend it was supernatural. I am going to say what I think is the truer thing, which is that 15-year-olds know more than we give them credit for. And they pay attention to their teachers, and sometimes they make a small gesture in the language they have. And the gesture lands. You don't watch your sister's last video 40 times to remember her. You watch it 40 times because watching is the only thing she still has. And eventually, you learn that she does not need you to be the one watching. She needs you to be the one who comes back. I came back. I do not know what happened to my sister. I know that I have a mother who has been through this in her own way. And I know that I have an editor named Vivian who loves my sister too. And I know that I have a classroom of 28 sophomores who needed me to be present on Wednesday afternoon. And I know that the door is still open somewhere in Wheeling, West Virginia. And I know that I am not going to walk into it. The afternoon light came through the classroom window. It was the kind of October light that turns gold, leaning toward gray. The kids were writing. I sat at my desk. I watched them write. I did not watch a video. I did not check a hash. I did not count squares. I watched 28 children try, in their own ways, to find words for something old. That is what I have now. That is enough.